Hi again, it's Douglas Scott McCarron. I want to talk to you about a word. The reason I'm going to be using it, it's extraordinary is the word, is I just kind of want to point out some things about it. But I also want to point out that language is constructed in such a way to reveal things. Some very smart, intelligent people from the past created these words to pass on something from generation to generation to generation. Because we're all human beings. And we're all trying to figure out what the heck's going on here. A lot of us, end up in this kind of mindset of, what's the point? Let's just get drunk. There is no truth. I don't agree with that. There's no truth in the words. There's no truth in the concepts. But there is truth in being the life force that you are. You just have to let go of the concept as being the truth. Now, I'm not saying let go of human thought. Again, I'm a bookkeeper. I play classical guitar. I program software. I edit videos. All those take structures and organizations and being able to think. But they're just a way of getting things done. It's like time. Time is just made up. It's not actually really there. Now you have the passage of seasons, you have the planets cycling around, you have the earth going around the sun, spring, summer, winter, fall. But, 12 o'clock is just made up. It's a way of, so you and I can make an agreement that, we're going to be in such and such a place, and we both want to be there roughly at the same time so we can meet. I mean, there are some cultures, it's really big in the United States, time. Some cultures, they sort of assume there's going to be like a gap of a few hours between people showing up. But, not in the U.S. But I want to get to this word, extraordinary. Because I just kind of want to use it as an example about how using it properly really opens things up. For instance, I talked in another video about the word forgiveness. It actually has, you bring something to the fore. You bring things from the unseen to the fore where you can see it, and then you give them the fore. You give them an opening for the future. Extraordinary is usually pronounced, in the United States at least, extraordinary. Thing is, there's no such word, extror-dinary. So, it's actually not accurate. Now, you can sit there and go, oh, what's the point? But there's actually a big point to this. So, the word extraordinary. Airy means to have the attributes of something. So, ordinary means to have the attributes of airy, ordin, to have the attributes of ordin. Ordin is an interesting word. It comes out of, I believe, Middle English. Hard to describe exactly what it means. But it's kind of like something that's undifferentiated from similar things is the best way I can really put it. So for instance, if you have a screw, it's an individual screw. You look at it, you can see it, you can see all of its details. And then you throw it in a barrel of a bunch of other screws, and it's just one of a bunch of other screws. It kind of disappears into the group. It's not defined or separated. So the ordin is undifferentiated from similar things. It's the best way I can put it. In English history, more so than in a lot of other cultures, like you had a king. The king was whoever hacked their way into power. And they basically were generally kind of brutish people, and they ruled their kingdom. Now this gets into another word, ruled. You notice you rule a kingdom. There's a ruler. The ruler is a measurement. It's a measuring tool. You take the measuring tool, put it against your subjects, and they are ruled. The English would actually, every time a new king showed up, measure. Kind of cold around here, sorry. Hope that sneeze didn't bother you. They would actually measure, a king dies, the king is dead, long live the king, okay, let's get the new one. They would measure the foot of the new king. However long that was, that's a foot. And they'd go all through the train where the king ruled, because it was defined, it was ruled by the king, and they remeasured everything. And then as the king got bigger and grew up, they kept remeasuring his foot, remeasuring everything by a foot, and this went on all the time. And in England, everything belonged to the king. Everything was the king. The king was all things, and all things were defined and measured by the king. This is where the king is the mean. He's the definer. He's the set thing that all things are defined by. And you were measured against what the king needed and got your meaning. So that's where meaning comes from. It's just how you fit in what the king needs. In England, for instance, if your last name was Cooper, Cooper actually wasn't your last name. Cooper was your job for the king. Coopers made barrels. Smiths banged on iron, formed it into thing. Bakers, Charlie Baker. Bakers baked. Walkers walked along the edge of various rulers' land to make sure nobody was mucking around with the borders. You can see they're all jobs. You don't have a name. You don't have a family. You have a first name, you have a job assigned, and you are completely under the rule of the king. The king could do whatever they wanted with you. In most other countries, you had a similar situation, but at least you had a family name. You might be subjugated by, underneath the king, but you had a family name. And this went all the way down into the peasantry. In England, you had family names if you were rich. But the peasantry, you just had a job. And if you challenged it, most kings were brutes who hacked their way into power, and they had soldiers who were basically there to suppress the population or murder them if they got out of control. And they got paid to do that. Man, if they didn't pay them, kings can suddenly get killed. They eventually tried to stabilize this by assigning a particular family. And that's where the kings come from. Because every time a king died, if you don't have it set who goes next, everybody who wants to be next suddenly pulls out a sword and starts hacking away at each other. And then they raise up armies and make them fight against each other. Now, back to this word orden. Raise up armies. A bunch of defenseless peasants with no name who are completely subjugated emotionally, mentally, economically to this king have to go do what he orders you. Notice order and orden. Because back to the barrel, you throw in the screw, it goes in among all the screws and just disappears in the orden. The peasant is in the masses, and the mass is the orden. And you are undifferentiated from all the other people in that mass. The only person who matters is the king. And then their family and their children and everything. And then there were some local dukes and duchesses and things like that that also had names. And, those sorts of things, they kept contracts on how they got married because there were all these political things going on. But among the Orden, they didn't care if you got married. Your kids were there just to be used and tormented the way they wanted and then killed if they got in the way. That's what Orden is. And unless you were the ruler, that's what your place was. An undifferentiated thing among the mass of similar things. Ordinary needs to have the attributes of that. So when you're ordinary, you're just a meaningless, irrelevant member, indifferentiated from similar things. Just another being to be used and tormented as the king saw fit. Extraordinary. Extra, it's kind of like outside or beyond. So extraordinary means to be outside or beyond, having the attributes of being indistinguished from a similar thing that doesn't matter. Essentially is what the word comes down to. Extraordinary is very different from extraordinary, which is an undefined word. It actually has a very specific thing it's talking about. And it really came in English law when you got into things like individualism. Individualism really kind of took off in England because, unlike France or Spain, where you were a member of a family, even if you were a peasant or not, it was so ingrained in the populace that they didn't even really exist and nobody cared about them except as something to use, that when they rose up, it was more about the individual. And a lot of that came out of Scotland. It's actually kind of funny. Scotland came up with a lot of the thoughts that eventually led to the United States' Constitution. In the United States, you can still be poor and suffer and on, but at least you're an individual. You're extraordinary. China, I know, they used to have all these walls between the various rulers, and there were gates you would go through. The walls and gates weren't really to protect the rulers from each other. It was to make sure their serfs, their nobodies, didn't try to escape because there's only one way out. So they're basically just big prison camps where the ruler could do what they wanted inside. As long as he paid his troops, who would kill him if he didn't. Happened in Rome. The Praetorian Guard protected the emperor. Well, until the emperor screwed them, and then they'd go kill him and get another emperor. It is one of the blessings of democracy. You still have a ruler who thinks they can do whatever they want, but at least you get to vote on who they are and throw them out every 4 years. A little harder to do in a monarchy. So anyway, extraordinary. It's that has a lot of impact once you know what the word means. Extraordinary doesn't really have that much. It's just, a saying that doesn't have any real basis in language. And this goes on, again, forgiveness has a very specific meaning. It's trying to say something to you from the past. It's in almost every word that we have. Somebody invented it and gave it a certain meaning. Again, definition, the king ruled. You get your meaning from the king. Now they turned it into the language. As we became individuals, the word took on meaning inside of the language, and you would take it on yourself. So it's a very important word, as are all of them. So main thing is You have this word, you have all your tens of thousands of words in all the languages, they're all kind of pointing at things. And yet the same, they're part of this cocoon we're talking about. It's just the cocoon tends to be based more on extraordinary, sort of assumed, presumed things, whereas the actual language might actually give you some freedom from it. Actually, if you study what the words mean. And then, there's this saying about, you hear it over and over, be extraordinary, be extraordinary. So you've got outside or beyond having the attributes of being undifferentiated from a similar thing. Then you have the word be. Be, again, back to the cocoon. All your discussion and inner chatter and views of how you're going to change yourself and how you judge yourself and I'm going to get free of my own judgment and story of the universe and invent a new story of the universe, and that's my freedom. But you're still in a story. You still haven't reached you. That's what be is. When you step in to who you actually are, not your description of who you are. And from there, you be outside, having the attributes of being indistinguishable from similar things. Anyway, thank you.